Hey everyone, it's Angela Stevens with the podcast Refocus with Angela. And I have got a guest that you are just going to be so inspired by. I have read his background, I've heard about him, and we've got him on the show. And so we're really excited. But today we have Dr. Justin Jacques. PhD. He is the founder of the Human Theory Group. You may have heard about him, seen him, you may have gone to him before, but he's got a great background and he works in the clinical coaching and counseling area. So first of all, Dr. Jacques, thank you so much for being on our podcast today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Angela. This is really fun and a pleasure.
You're so welcome. So first of all, I want to go back. So people hear different counselors in different places, and you have the Human Theory Group. So first of all, I'm curious, the name, how did that come about?
Yeah, so I'm pretty much a humanist from my background. So I really believe in the whole person. So human theory is kind of comes out of that. And so I really value the connection. I think that's one of the most important things of helping people change.
Absolutely. So you started this business back in 2019, and talk to us a little bit about people see clinical coaching and then they see different like coaches in different areas. What is the difference, and when should someone choose to go to a clinical coach?
Yeah, so I would say a clinical coach is more in the realm of everyday kind of worries, challenges, problem solving, overcoming kind of smaller type problems. And I'd say clinical counseling, which I do, where I have to be licensed, that's going to be more of a depth process. That's going to be more of insight-based therapy, using maybe going into some trauma work. So I'd say that for me, the way that I see the distinction is based on the depth of the presenting issue and maybe the duration of the treatment.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. And you mentioned something I wanted to talk about, because we get a lot of people that will ask questions on our website. And so, by the way, if anyone's listening and they have questions for our guests, please write to us on our website, which is Refocus with Angela. But a lot of people will write to us about worry and anxiety. And
Yes.
they always say, if you get a chance, ask any of your, psychologists or coaches, when should you be worried? Funny. When should you be worried about worrying too much, or when it becomes, too much? Because we all kind of worry at some point or another. Some have more anxiety than others. But when is it something that you say, okay, this is a real problem?
Yeah, I think it's about the quantity of worry. So if you're worrying all of the time and it's creating impairment, and that's impairment in your personal life, your professional life, with your family, that's when it's something to really get checked out, I'd say. So really about the quantity of worry. So if you're worrying all day, there's a lot of fear. That's another word that people don't realize. Worry often has fear to it. So if you feel a lot of fear, a lot of worry, and it's impairing your ability to function in life, that's when I think it's important to seek mental health treatment.
Yes. And, it was interesting. I was reading an article recently that a lot of younger adults will self medicate, right? And that's been around for a while, but they'll do that with either drinking or vaping or something. And it's an escape to handle that. And that's not a great idea, right? So
Yeah.
if someone is doing that right now and they know it's a problem, but let's say they're a young adult and they don't have anyone at home pushing them, what would you say to that person?
Yeah, I would say there's a number of things that are really helpful that besides vaping, social media, which we're seeing quite a bit of, and that is connection, connecting with people, right?
Yes.
Sometimes just having cathartic ventilation, which is what therapy is about, talking with a loved one, a family
Yeah.
member. You don't have to be a therapist to be therapeutic, right? You can find a friend, a family member that can listen, help you talk through something that can be helpful. Number two, I really recommend exercise and good sunlight. Get outside, be in nature, do a walk. Exercise is cumulative. You don't always have to do some hardcore workout. Just get some movement in. I like to use the word movement. That can be a really helpful tool to regulate some worry and anxiety. And then the third thing is learn how to breathe. Breathing is so important. I do at least, this is pretty a lot, but I do 25 minutes in the morning and I do 25 minutes at night. That is something that I do religiously to help manage worry, anxiety, those sort of things. So I think the last thing I would say actually is try to see if you can limit the amount of social media coverage, YouTube, right? We're starting to see the effects of a generation that has grown up in that space, and that's something that we could really pull back from can be helpful.
That's so true. So true. Even myself, during the day, I will push myself to go take a walk, just even like 10 minutes, because if I don't, I can get just so involved in work that you don't get away. And it's so important. And the other thing that I would add on with you is music.
Mm.
Sometimes, calming music for me, that's what really works for me sometimes when I've got so much on my mind that I just want to stop and get away. And we have this saying, it says, with our business, I always say, we all get so busy. Sometimes we need to stop, take a moment, and refocus, right? So so I get that. So talk to us a little bit about, what are people struggling with right now? Because we've come through the pandemic, right? Other things, but what are people struggling with now?
I think one of the things that I'm seeing the most is a struggle with motivation, feeling really amotivated, right? I think we've been away from social connection. We've been away from pushing ourselves to tolerate our emotions when we go out and have social interactions. We have to work all day, those sorts of things. So that's one of the big things that I'm seeing a lot of. And then inattention issues. That's another one, right? Having a hard time staying focused, concentrating on work tasks or jumping around a lot. I think that's another one. Anxiety. I think for my high performers, a lot of perfectionism and OCD type tendencies I've seen after the pandemic. So really helping those folks kind of modulate, be able to shift gears, things like that.
Awesome. So the other thing I wanted to ask you is, I am a fan of coaching and of counseling because I went through a very sad divorce when I had a 1 year old little baby that I adored, and it was really really a sad time for me. And getting the help was everything. And
Mhm.
sometimes, people that have never grown up with counseling, which I didn't, but, if let's say they never had counseling with their family through a trauma, something like that, it's brand new to them, even older adults, right? And I find that and I hear that. So for those people, I have this question for you. So is it something where two things, should they go to their doctor first, or should they contact a counselor and, uh, and agree or disagree, but you're never too old to start and go to a counselor.
Yeah, I think both pathways can work. I'm a very holistic person. If you see me, I'm going to ask you, have you seen your primary care physician? Because I think we need to look at all aspects of the human. So I think either route is good. And I think it's never too old. You're never too old to start because I think people get a lot of, they watch TV and they see this is what therapy is. Really, it's a guided conversation. Often I will bring in some tools, maybe some perspective. It's really simpler than you might think, and it's not as difficult as you might think. So I think anyone can benefit from it. And I think more people, as stigma is going down, health seeking behavior is up, according to the research. We're seeing more and more people seeing a therapist just like they see their PCP. I myself see a therapist. It's super helpful.
That was my next question. So, one thing I remember years ago was my counselor was fantastic. And she made one comment. She said, even we have counselors. And at
Yes.
that time, I thought, well, that's really odd. And now, of course, that makes a lot of sense. But tell us why.
Yeah, I think for me, as I started my journey to become a therapist about 22 years ago, it was my first time experiencing therapy myself, and I ended up doing about 7 years of work. If you can imagine, like it was great. I really had to work through a lot of things to be a healthy, happy person and to be a really good helping professional. Then I took a break, but I always go back, and I think it helps me continue to gain skills, see if there's any insights that I'm missing, to work through anything that's coming up as a therapist. It's a super helpful, healthy thing that I would recommend for anyone.
Absolutely. Okay, so this is a question from parents and from young adults. If they are coming to see you as a counselor, whether it's you or someone else, instead of coming in and being quiet and saying, I don't know, how can a person prepare to go to a counselor to have it beneficial from the very first day?
Yeah, I think for me, and it's not, this doesn't work for everyone, but if you have some things that you want to work on, so with a therapist, we're always looking at what's the goal and what's the task in the therapy session, right? And so if you have some ideas about that, that can be really helpful. If
Mhm.
you're having symptoms, if you know the frequency, duration, and intensity of those symptoms, and you can report them, that can be really, really helpful. I
Mhm.
feel like some of my folks don't want to do work between sessions, but some
Yes.
of my people really do, and that can really potentiate the things that we get done because they're doing a lot of work between sessions. So it depends on the style of the person, but if
Yes.
you want to put in more, you're going to get more out of it.
Absolutely. And if you think about it, if they write it down, they'll be ready. They'll be ready to talk about it because sometimes if you go to a session, you go in and even though it's all clouded, right? And you can't cloudy and you can't think at that moment. And this is, it's an investment. It's an investment in your mental health, right? To get better and to get moving forward from the things that you might be struggling with. Right. So that's really interesting. So I have to ask you this question. So there are a lot of people out there, and by the way, I want you to tell me what states are you licensed in? Because Dr. Jacques, he does a lot of remote coaching and counseling. So definitely take him up on this because he's really he's a kind of person that you can talk to. And take it from me. I talk to a lot of people all the time, and he's very engaging and very open and easy to talk to. So with that being said, what states are you licensed in?
Yeah, so I'm licensed in Oregon, Montana, Pennsylvania, Washington, D.C., the district, Maryland, Virginia, and North Carolina.
Okay, perfect. So
And the great news is that the counseling, my profession has got the compact on the way. So within this year, hopefully we'll be licensed within 32 states if you're licensed in one of the compact states. So that's a really cool thing that's coming. The psychologists have 25 states. We have 32 or so right now. So hopefully that'll create more people available to see.
wow, that's awesome. So the other thing we did get a question. This was really interesting. I thought we had and I'm throwing these questions because I think you're the perfect person to ask. But I had it was a young woman who said that she had never shared fears that she had as a child with her parents, and she was in her 30s, and she had never told them about just things that she they couldn't understand, and she was fearful as a child. And I wanted to write back, but I'm not a psychologist, and I wanted to say tell them because they'll probably be relieved to understand, because as parents we want our children to be happy and to do well. So but if somebody's holding that, because I think a lot of people do, if they're holding something, is it healthy to tell their parents later in life?
Yeah, that's a great question. I was trained in family systems theory, and it really depends on the family system.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there could be reasons that they didn't share, and that's really important to know. I would say, in general, if we were to say like more healthy, more dynamic families, if there was such a thing, then yes, of course, being able to kind of let a family member know, a parent, some things of some fears, I think that would be wonderful. But I think we have to be careful to generalize because there are family systems out there that might be really hard because they may not get the response that they're looking for, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was funny because I had a personal experience I was going to write back, but I wanted to just share it with you. But when I was younger, I'm in my 50s, but I'd had surgery when I was a little girl. And at the time, I remembered the steel doors that they would take me
Mhm.
from my mother. I would be screaming and I would be so afraid, and because they were going to hurt me. So in my mind, I always thought my parents or somebody was going to take me away. So when I would go to school, I didn't want to go to school in kindergarten. My parents, you guys will love this. They took me to a psychiatrist. They tested me everything, and I guess I was okay. But what it was, and I never told my parents this until college. It was funny we got that question, and my mother was so relieved. But what it was is when I went to school, I saw the nurse, and the nurse was in white, and so I thought that the nurse was going to come and get me, and I would never see my family again. Why? I never told my parents. So if that is any of you that are listening, I would say don't wait until you're in your 30s. Tell them sooner, because when I told my mother, it was such a relief with her, So it's interesting how these things bury down and
That's
the
right.
inside of us, right? And that's so unhealthy, right? Because I was fine later on, and I remember specifically the psychiatrist said, you need to give her confidence. Whatever's going on with her, give her. And they got me into gymnastics, and that did it, for me. So I completely get that. One thing I did want to ask you. So a lot of people coming out of COVID, a lot of people are doing good. They're moving forward, but there's also a lot of people that it's really still impacting them.
Mm.
Is there anything, let's say, for instance, if there's someone that cannot afford to go to a counselor right now,
Yep.
and they don't have the means to do that, what can someone like that do to, kind of pull their life together? Is there any ideas or suggestions that you would have? Because I remember talking to, I think it was a Uber driver. They lived in New York City, and they had stayed, I think it was like an 800 feet apartment. And that's like a small place. And she felt like in prison. Right. And so it
Yeah.
was hard for her. So any advice for people like that?
Yeah, I would say a number of things. First, like if there's a clergy member or a faith-based group or something like that that's free, that could be a place to start. Again, you don't have to be a therapist to be therapeutic. Number two, like today we have information more than anywhere else. So I think looking at podcasts, looking at things like YouTube channels, there are infinite number of folks out there that can give you resources. And then number three are books, bibliotherapy. That's a thing, right? So if you have access to your public library, there are a number of books that would be incredibly helpful. So we have an information age where things are so available. I think that would be a place to start if you didn't have resources at this time.
Absolutely. And reading, it seems like it's just like a lost art. It's kind of like go back to the books and open it and read it. It's really because it makes you stop and makes you stop and everything else and focus on the book maybe that you're reading at the time. So I get that. Well, I want to talk to you a little bit about you for a minute. So this podcast is all about focusing. And you have got to be, I mean, you may be one of these people that you are focused all the time. Everything is great. But talk to us. Do you ever have those days, first of all, at home, with your family or surroundings, that you just are not focused and you cannot even think of how to get it together? Do you ever have those days like that?
I do. I do. I think they happen, particularly when I don't get a good night's sleep would be an example. So I think sleep hygiene is so important. Or maybe it's just been I'm an introvert, right? So maybe I've had a ton of interaction with people and I need to recharge my batteries. But some days I'm just not focused. So yeah, absolutely that happens to me.
You're an introvert. I would never have thought that.
I'm a fake extrovert.
There you go. I love it. So, okay. So tell me this. Okay. This has got to have happened to you because I've been dying to ask a counselor this. So when you're one-on-one with a person, we all kind of do this at one time or another, but we space out, right? Or
Yeah.
our mind is elsewhere and you might not even remember the question that the person asked you. So, many people they could be in meetings, they could be in interviews. If that happens, how do you pull yourself back in?
Yeah, so one technique that I use consistently is I write notes on the side of like if I'm taking notes in a session, so that I can take it out of my background noise and put it on paper, and then I can come back to the moment. So that's one of the tools I use the most is just, oh, here's an idea, because our brains are always thinking. I just write it down on the side, I let it go away, and then I can come right back to the moment.
I love that because I've always thought about that because again, when you're with the counselor, time, right, is so important because you got little time. But if and I always say, ask the question again. If if you forget and you're spaced out, just ask the person, say, can you repeat that or something? But that's a better idea. Well, first of all, like I said, your background is so amazing. He works in consulting. You do clinical coaching and you do counseling. Have I covered everything that you do as well?
Yeah, no, I'm a really busy guy. So I also do research for a number of different groups, which is really fun on the side. So I do something that's similar to AI called corpus linguistics research, and I study the interaction of the counselor and the client in the therapy section using natural language processing. That's something I do just for fun on the side, but I'm a really busy guy.
Okay, that's what he does for fun. And no, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Well, that's great. Like I said, I could talk to you all day long, but please check out. We'll put your website. And actually, why don't you go ahead and tell us your website where they can find you?
Yep. It's www.humantheorygroup.com.
Okay, we'll put the states that you are licensed in and how to reach you. And you're probably busy. How busy are you to get an appointment with you?
So I'm about 3 weeks out. So,
Okay.
but sometimes I'm full, sometimes I'm less full. So it's always worth reaching out.
Okay. And then lastly, do you specialize in any certain area that if somebody's looking for somebody that's in a certain area, do you specialize in one area or another more than others?
Yeah, I might just describe my private practice just so you kind of have I have
Yeah.
a number, I see a ton of physicians. I have a number of those. I have a number of executives. I have a number of college students. I really like college students. And I have a really big focus on ADHD and autism and those high functioning autism. So those are kind of the four areas. And then I do a little bit of sports psychology too. I'm a certified mental performance coach. So I do have a number of athletes, maybe about five of them. So those are kind of the buckets that I work in.
I love that. That's awesome. Yeah, that's very interesting because those are areas that, believe me, I always say one of the things that I did when I found out I had ADHD, I was 45, and I hired myself a ADHD business coach.
Oh,
And
yes.
it was the best money I
Mm.
ever spent because he really made me take a step back, look at my business, and he said, you're the dishwasher, you're the clerk, you're the receptionist, you're the salesperson, you're doing this. He said, you have to be the CEO of your companies. And it changed everything. I just needed to hear that and hear that perspective from someone else. So I get it. So, well, again, I could talk to you all day, but I have one last question for you. So,
Sure.
uh, on those days when you are maybe going and you're going to give a presentation or meet with a group of physicians and some you've got to have game on, but it's again one of those days and you get in your car or the train or wherever you're at and you're going to that meeting. Is there a song or genre or an artist that you listen to that gives you game on?
Yeah, I would go with the band Led Zeppelin, The Levee Breaks. I think that is the best pump up song in the history of music.
I love that. That is great. Awesome. Okay, perfect. Well, we'll put that down. So, well, anyway, thank you so much for doing this today. Like I said, if you've never heard of this individual, he is amazing. He's open. He's welcoming. He will make you. He's one of those coaches and counselors, I would say, that you're not intimidated by. He's very open to talk to and somebody I would highly recommend. So definitely check him out. But thank you again, Dr. Jacques. We graciously appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, Angela, for having me. I really appreciate you.
You're welcome.